Hi, and welcome to the Intentional Wealth Update from Morton Brown Family Wealth for the week of April 4th, 2022. I'm Dennis Morton here with Katie Brown and Cody Demmel. How are you guys?
Good. Great. How are you, Dennis?
Great. So today we're going to talk a little bit about home prices, what's happened with home affordability, the decisions people are making now that interest rates have started to not really creep up, interest rates have started to shoot up a little bit. And then we're going to tie that up by talking about decision making, how parents teach children, and how can we influence the next generation to make good decisions based on our own experiences. Cody, you shared with us an article from CNBC earlier this week, just talking about all the dynamics at play with home prices right now. What's happening?
Yeah, so there was a good article from CNBC that just went over a lot of the different things that are happening in the home market, whether it's mortgage applications dropping from the all-time highs of last year with interest rates going up, and then went over some of the different housing affordability levels. And they just broke it down in a lot of different categories.
And I think their point was that this doesn't look like a bubble for some reasons, right? Why would this not necessarily be a bubble like we had 15 years ago?
Yeah, the author was talking about back in 2008, 2009, how this is different from them. Is back then there was a lot of people buying houses, trying to make a quick flip, doing all those housing shows that we've seen. But now he pointed to the fact that it's a lot more millennials buying their first home or upgrading their home, or the work from home environment is getting a lot of first time home buyers back into the market.
And it's a real supply demand dynamic at play.
Yeah,
Katie,
yeah.
you were talking earlier about how there was a post financial crisis. They're just created some pinch points now that we're kind of paying for, right? From a labor perspective, from supplies, everything else.
Yeah, I was listening to a Wall Street Journal podcast, and in there they were highlighting, at the time of the great financial crisis, obviously the home building just plummeted. And a lot of people left the workforce. A lot of the labor that they were building the homes, they were in the industry, and they left, and they haven't fully come back. And really, that whole area of home building has been depressed since then. I mean, it's grown, but it hasn't grown at the same pace, and it hasn't necessarily kept pace with demand, and we're feeling that pinch point. I think that's part of the reason that we're feeling a bit of a pinch point now when it comes to supply.
I can't remember if we said this before, but there's always this dynamic between scarcity and abundance. We bounce back and forth there. And I think that what happened in the great financial crisis is we got burned on the abundance side. We ended up with way too many houses being built, way too much supply. And all of those vendors, whether it's home builders or lumber yards, said, we are never getting caught with that much inventory again. So we're going to make sure we're going to operate, we're going to keep inventories low, we're not going to build as much. And then everybody shows, it's a scarcity thing, that everybody shows up at your door at the same time, and you're scarce, and here go the prices. It's just that's that accordion effect. It happens, and we see it in all markets,
Yeah, in that same article, they went over the history, I think it was over the past 10 years, of the current supply in houses. And normally it's around a 4 to 6 month of supplies if you kept at the normal pace that we're at right now, that the housing market could cover the sales for 4 to 6 months. But now we're all the way down to 2 months. And that's just how low the supply is.
Another big difference between what was happening back in 2008 timeframe versus now is just how lending has occurred and the due diligence, what the banks and the lenders go through now versus then, and making sure that who they're lending to, that the people can afford it. The affordability is there. They've done away with a lot of the different kind of cute products to get people inside of the door. And there's a lot more regulation kind of overseeing what happens in that realm. And I think that really has protected consumers. So the lending that's occurring now is much more stable and has greater opportunity to, those individuals are more likely to pay off their debts versus what was happening before too. So just another contributor or contrast, I guess, to what was happening before and what's happening now. And another reason why perhaps this isn't a bubble, if it's good quality home buyers just looking to buy something.
Right. And also, you think about what could possibly disrupt this, or maybe not that it's a bubble, but do rising interest rates kind of cause everything to screech to a halt? The writer Ben Carlson tweeted a chart about saying that right now with, mortgage rates as of today in the 4.5, range or so, up from 2.7 a couple of months ago. That's a big move. But he points out that between 1971 and 2008, the average interest rate was never below 5%. So being at 4.5, that is the historical anomaly. I think a lot of what we felt in the first quarter, it's almost like a pain of returning to normal. It's a kind of a painful regression back from abnormality, the abnormality of fiscal policy and monetary policy, and getting back to normalcy. And again, it's like the pains of scarcity, the pains of abundance. There's two. It can happen both ways, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dennis. I mean, that pain of getting back to normal, I think we can feel it in a lot of different areas. Like you said, whether it's housing, whether it's inflation, getting that kind of back to a normal spot, or interest rates on bonds, kind of getting those to a more sustainable, normal spot, and all of that is kind of creating a churn along the way that everyone's trying to figure out and trying to manage through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some pain for people who actually finally have to go back to the office too.
Yes. Yeah.
Stop complaining, Cody.
No, I love being in the office, but the one thing I will complain about is having to park on the third or fourth level instead of the first or second.
I know. It's not you. It's just all those other people. I get it. Totally get it. So let's tie this into more so than a financial planning, more of a financial education conversation. There was an article that we found, also a survey that was done of parents, where they asked them about the conversations they have with their kids about money and how frequently they happen. And the first thing they asked was, who do you think it's the primary responsibility to educate kids about money? And 85% said it's the parents' responsibility. But then they asked, how frequently do you speak with the kids? 31% say they never do. Less than 30% say they talk about it weekly. And then just most people are just on a smattering of occasions in the course of the year. We're talking about buying houses. We've talked about going to college or job decisions, everything else, but nobody's talking to the kids about money. How do you guys think parents can do, and we're talking parents at all stages. You may be in your 60s and talking to your 30-something children about buying their first home. You may be in your 30s and talking to your kids about why you're moving and maybe the economics of that. How can we improve those conversations? Or what are some things that parents can do to build their confidence in talking those things up in their families?
Yeah. One of the things that the article highlighted is that sometimes parents don't feel equipped to have those conversations. They don't necessarily feel confident in navigating some of the personal finance discussion. A big part of it is sharing experiences and kind of talking through the decisions maybe that you're making and why you're making them at the right level that's appropriate for the kids. I do think that there's a formal education component that should happen within our schools. That's my personal opinion. But I think that it should be augmented with having an open conversation, having it consistently so it doesn't feel awkward or taboo within the family.
Right. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my two kids right now are golden retrievers, so I'm not talking to them about that. But I think even if you don't want to give them advice, kind of as what Katie was saying, just talking about your experiences out loud will give them at least the general guidance of, okay, this is what my parents talked through or thought about when they were doing this major house purchase or going to college, what they thought about.
Yeah, there's a guy that I started reading recently, a guy named Bob Seawright, who has a newsletter called The Better Letter. And he makes the point that people are always thinking that finances are a system and you set a system in motion. But the problem is there's always a human element. Like you could provide, if you said this is the one insight that you would ever need to know, we always find a way to screw it up because of our humanness. And I think that's the part that if parents can be vulnerable and admit that, hey, we're not going to get everything right. We've had some wins and losses in the past. We're probably going to have wins and losses in the future, but this is how we're learning. It's almost like there's a process that you can teach kids to follow, and just make sure you're open to learning things along the way. Because I think the other thing is it's not teaching people that it's not how much you have, it's the decisions you make. You can make a lot of money and spend a lot of money too. It's a process that you follow. All right, speaking of processes that we follow, Cody, you had the best process in picking the winner of our in-house March Madness tournament. Tell us about who won.
Kansas. Kansas is my favorite team. I will admit I picked them every single year. So it was good that they finally won.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Kansas had lost in 6 national championship games before, winning their 4th this year. So I didn't realize how far the odds were stacked in your favor. So great job there. Katie, you came in second, I believe, well behind Cody.
Oh, well, thank you for adding that.
Sorry, I'm just and well ahead of
it was
me.
down to the final 4. I was leading up until we got down to the final weekend.
I know, and I was dead last, having picked Kentucky, who was the first casualty of good old St. Peter's Peacocks. So it was all over. But that's all well and good. Our fantasy baseball league starts next week, so we'll be back at it, making our picks for a 162 game season. So
no, actually, we won't. You guys can.
We can. All right. Sounds good. All right. If you have any questions regarding financial planning or investing, feel free to reach out to us. Also, on Thursday, April 28th at 8:30 in the morning, we're doing our live quarterly market update. Check out our LinkedIn profile or our Morton Brown webpage to register for that. We look forward to seeing you then, and I hope everyone has a great week.